So we're holding in Tractate Shabbos, page 17. The name of the chapter is Yetzias Shabbos, and still in Perek on the first chapter in Tractate Shabbos. We ended off yesterday with a very harsh statement that was said by Rabbi Tarfon, that it was in regard to movable items when they serve as an oil over a corpse, meaning you have a movable object that was placed on top of a corpse, that they can cause tuma to be converted when they have the thickness of a goad. A goad is a piece of wood that was used to encourage animals to move around, and so if this goat is somewhat on top of the corpse, it can mevina satuma. They can cause tuma to be conveyed. So Rabbi Tarfon didn't like the interpretation of his children, and he says, "A kapach es bonai." Should cut off my children because it's halacha mekupachas, because this law is cut off. What does that mean? The law is cut off. It is incoherent law. Right. It is incoherent law. Rabbi Tarfon felt there is no reason to fear that the leniency regarding an oil consisting a pole with a tefach about 4 or 5 inches circumference will lead to a leniency regarding a true oil that is a tefach wide. People are intelligent enough to realize the difference between width and circumference, and thus he claims that it is inconceivable that a decree was passed on that account. So that's the reason why he made that statement. So Rabbi Tarfon explains the circumstances of the ruling and the mistaken interpretation. Aikar oivel umarder al kesfei. It happens that a farmer was walking on the road with his goad on his shoulder, holding that stick, the goad. Ve'ihel tzidoi achas al hakever, and the end of this stick, of this goad, lay over and above a grave. Timu oisai, so the rabbis declared them tameh. Mishum kelim ama'ilim alamet, on account of utensils laying above a corpse. So try to imagine a guy walks with a stick, and the other side of the stick, he puts a stick on his back, the other side of the stick somehow was covering the tent, covering a corpse, a dead person, and therefore, the rabbis in that case declared timu oiso. The rabbis declared them tameh. Why? On account of utensil laying above a corpse. Omar Rabbi Akiva ani asakin. Rabbi Akiva said, I shall amend this law, shiudiv hachom kayomim, so that the words of the sages should stand. Shiyu kol hametaltel mevin tumah. When it comes to any kind of movable object, they can cause tumah to be brought. Al odom shenoi soisom, on the person that carries them. Be'oivi amardeya, when they have the thickness of a goad. A standard goad had a circumference of 1 tefach, which is 4 or 5 inches. Its width was approximately 1/3 of a tefach. So the circumference is a tefach, and the width was approximately 1/3 of a tefach. 1/3 of a tefach. By rabbinic decree, movables that have a minimum width of a goad form an oil hames. In respect to the person who carries them over a corpse, he is declared an avatuma. He is the primary source of tuma, of impurity, and must undergo a week-long purification process This is the 11th decree of the 18th decree of the 18 enactments that were decreed by Beis Shammai on that day, that they had a majority over Beis Hillel. So, Val Shar Odom v'Chelim Val Atzum v'Cholshen, upon themselves, whatever their thickness is, Val Shar Odom v'Chelim, and upon other persons and articles v'Feiseach Tefach, when they have a width of 1 tefach. So we're going to 17a2. V'Amar Rabbi Yanai u'Mardea Shomru en be'ovir tefach. Mardea that we are discussing, it doesn't have the width of a tefach, the circumference of a tefach. V'yesh doesn't have the thickness of a tefach. V'yesh be'kefu tefach, but it does have the circumference of a tefach. So it does not have the thickness of a tefach, but the circumference has a tefach. Has about 5 inches. V'gozu ale kefu mishumovia, but the rabbis decree that its circumference of a tefach constitutes an oil on account of its thickness of a tefach. Ul-Rabbi Tafon, and that, what does it mean? That if it's an oil, then the fact that the stick will, for example, over a corpse, immediately the person that carries it becomes tumah, and the goat itself becomes tumah, and the primary source of tumah. Rabbi Tafon, the Omar HaKapach is Bonai, who says, cut off my children, Shaloch is Mekupachas, because this law is cut off. Botzulu, the number of 18 enactments is 1 short. So he said that the law of the daughters of the Kusins, the Kutens, or Kusins, in Hebrew, Kusim, considered nidos from their cradle, because they did not trust them to say when the daughters had their menstruation. On that day, the day of the 18 enactments, they also decreed about the daughters of the Kusim that they are considered nida from their birth, from their cradle. And in respect to their other decree regarding forgotten vessels, so like Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Tarfon agrees with Rabbi Meir. Veidoch, and what is the another law or the other enactment? Haboitzer legas, when someone harvests grapes for the winepress. Shammai says the grapes have become susceptible to tumah. Hillel lo yuchshar, but Hillel says they have not become susceptible to tumah. Amar lo Shammai. So the act of pressing the grapes, whether it makes you susceptible to tumah or not, makes it now because it's somewhat in the advanced preparation of becoming wine. So Shammai says it becomes susceptible. Hillel said it's not. Omar leHillel Shammai mipnei ma boisu b'Torah. Why, in your opinion, must one harvest grapes with utensils that are in a state of tahara? Ve'ein moiskin b'Torah. Yet you don't have to harvest olives in a state of tahara. So it's interesting that the word for when you deal with grapes, when you're dealing with grapes, harvest grapes, is called boitzer, boitzrin. When you deal with olives, it's called moiskin, in plural. So the question is, why, when boitzrin, when we harvest the grapes, it has to be done with utensils that are pure, but when we are harvesting the olives, it doesn't have to be done with olives that are pure. So Shammai answers Beis Hillel, Omar loi al takniteni, don't bother me, don't anger me, don't provoke me, because Rani tuma afala mesika, because I shall decree tuma also in respect to the harvest of olives. So they stuck a sword in the house of study. Omru anichnasi kones Whoever wants to enter may enter, but no one gets out. But whoever wants to leave may not leave. On that day, Hillel was submissive. Is said before Bet Shammai, like one of his disciples. So on that day it was very difficult for Yisrael. Why? And it was as difficult as the day which the golden calf was made, that Beis Shammai dominated Beis Hillel. V'gozu Shammai ve'Hillel, but Shammai and Hillel passed a decree on the matter. V'lo kiblu minayu, but the populace did not accept it from them. V'osu talmidayu gozu, subsequently the disciple came and decreed it again. V'kiblu minayu, and this time the populace did accept it from them. So my time, Omar Rabbi Zeiri, Omar Rabbi Chanina, Zeiri sent the name of Rabbi Chanina, Gezerah Shemev Tzerenu B'Kubus Meris. The decree was enacted as a safeguard against the possibility that someone might harvest his grapes into Tomei basket. Ani Chalaman de Omar Klei Tomei Choishuv Mashkin. This answer is satisfactory according to the one who says that a vessel renders liquid significant. So according to the one who says that a vessel renders liquid significant, this is satisfactory. But according to the one who says that a tameh vessels that are impure, does not render liquid significant. What is there to say? The decree was enacted as a safeguard against the possibility that someone might harvest his grapes into pitched baskets that are waterproof. What's the problem with that? It says number 30, baskets lined with pitch. When someone harvests into such basket, he is interested in collecting the juice, and the condition of lerotzin, willingness, is fulfilled, and the grapes undergo hechsher by the juice that wets them. On account of such a case, they decreed that whenever anyone harvests grapes, even in the unlined basket where the juice goes to waste, the grapes are regarded as having undergone hechsher and are henceforth susceptible to tumah. So they had a special basket. They would contain the juice of the grapes. The decree was enacted as a safeguard against the possibility of clusters that cling together. Clusters that cling together. It says in 31, when the clusters cling together, the clusters of grape are coming together, the owner has to separate them, and thereby it is inevitable that he squeezes some juice out of them from the grapes, which then wets them, and then make them obviously susceptible to tumah. Sometimes a person goes into his vineyard, he's checking out the vineyard to see if it's time for harvest, if the grapes are ripe enough for harvest. And he takes a cluster of grapes in his test to find out if it's ready. He takes this cluster of grapes in order to squeeze it out. And in the process of squeezing, he sprinkles the juice on other grapes. And at the time of harvesting, the the liquids is still wet on them. Hechsher, making something kosher, making something susceptible, is not effective when food is still attached to the ground. Therefore, the Gemara specifies that the grapes are still wet, that the grapes that are still wet when they are plucked. Ve'idach, the Gemara resumes listing the 18 enactment. Ve'idach Omar, and what is another? Tovi Rishba Mo Shmuel. Tovi, the hunter, said in the name of Shmuel. So Tovi, the hunter, said in the name of Shmuel. Some say Rishba is the words of Nishba, that he was captured. As they call him, the hunter. And the hunter is usually the poacher, the one who catches others. But over here it says, Rashi explains that the word Bishba is similar to the word Nishba. We often find that the letters Reish and Nun are interchangeable. For instance, Ben or Bar, the same thing. The son, or Ben is Rabbi Shimon Ben Yochai, the son of Yochai, or Bar Yochai, same meaning. So the Nun and the Reish are interchangeable. Nishba is a net, and thus Tobi used to spread out nets to trap beasts and birds. However, Aruch takes Rishbo as a title or surname. He says that Rishbo is abbreviated from of Reish Beisav, the leader of a father's household. So, what did he say? Av Gidule Seruma. This this law, the growth of Teruma. Teruma is considered Teruma. Bovem Gozu was decreed on that very day when the 18 enactments were passed. What was the decree about Teruma? The 13 of the 18 enactments. My time. What is the reason for this decree? The decree enacted on account of Teruma, which is toher, that belongs. Teruma is generally donation, designated food to the temple. That now, once the designation takes place, it has a sanctity. So it is a decree enacted on account of Teruma, which is toher, that belongs to an Israelite, to prevent them from depriving the Kohanim of their due. Rava said, if Israelites are suspect of doing so, somewhat disqualifying the Teruma, so they don't have to give it to the Kohen, let them not separate a quantity of Teruma in the first place. It is possible, since it is possible to fulfill the Teruma requirement with a token amount. Just give the money instead of the fruits. Or rather, since it is possible, since it's possible to make merely 1 grain teruma, as Shmuel has stated, and in fact he did not do so, he is surely to be trusted. It says in number 6, if in fact he did separate a quantity of teruma, he certainly is not the cheap type of a person, is not a miser, and he can be trusted to re-sow his teruma. So what is really the decree? The decree was enacted on account of teruma that is tameh. Remember, the original decree was, in this case, gidulei teruma that was replanted. It is a decree enacted on account of teruma that is impure in the hands of the Kohen, that belongs to the Kohen. Dilma mashalo gabe, lest he keep it in his possession until the sowing season. Vos lidei sakola, in the meantime, waiting for the sowing season, he comes to a transgression by eating it. he has it in his house, so possibly that he might eat it. Like we're coming into Pesach, the provision of keeping chametz in the house, he might come to eat it. Finding a nice piece of cake that you left, you might eat it by mistake. So same thing with a kohen. He has a non-kosher truma, and he might say, "I'm going to wait to." His excuse would be, "I'm waiting to replant it, to sow it, and until the sowing season comes. In the meantime, he will be eating it." So Veidach Amar B'Chia Bar Ami B'Shmei Ula. B'Chia Bar Ami said the name of Ula. Av Mishich Baderech. Also, this law of this Mishnah, if darkness of Shabbos Eve overtakes someone on the road, meaning you are traveling on the road, and suddenly Friday afternoon it gets dark. You're stuck in the middle of your trip. What do? You have money on you. You have your wallet. You have things with you. Nois and Kisol Nochri should give his purse to a Gentile. Bovem Gozu was decreed on that day. This was also decreed on that day. Veidach Omar, and what is another decree of one of the 18? Omar Bali Omar Avimi Sanvoso. Bali said in the name of Avimi of a place called Sanvoso. Piton v'shamnu v'yenu v'nusen. The prohibitions on their bread, oil, and daughters of idolaters, kulam mishmoy noso dovo hein, are all part of the 18 enactments. These 4 items are counted as one, as follows in the Gemara, and are in the 15th decree of the 18 enactment. All is well according to Rabbi Meir. We're in page 17, B2 on the top. All is well according to Rabbi Meir, for in accordance with his view, we have 18 enactments. According to Rabbi Yossi, there are only 17. Rav Acha Bar Ada sent the name of Rabbi Yitzchok. Gozu al piton mishum shamnon. The reason why they decreed against the bread is because of their oil. The rabbis prohibited eating bread baked by idolaters, what we call today pas nochri or a pas akum. The rabbis prohibited eating bread baked by idolaters for fear of mixing with them socially. So if you eat their bread, you might be mixing with them, and ultimately it would lead to intermarriage. So according to some authorities, the prohibition applies only to bread baked in private home. What happened if the bread was baked in bakery for commercial purposes? It does not fall under the prohibition, assuming, of course, that all the ingredients are known to be kosher. At least the Yoredeo in 112 discusses it. So the reason why we are concerned with the bread is because of their oil. We are concerned with the bread because of their oil. And why are we concerned with the oil? The oil because of their wine. So the Gemara explains, on the bread, on account of the oil, what is the importance of oil over bread? Rather, the Gemara clarifies that we are concerned with their bread and their oil because of the wine. Wine is the main concern. And why are we concerned with their wine? If it's made with grapes and no other ingredients, it's all kosher, and it was not made for idolatry. Why are we concerned with their wine? So really the main concern is the daughters. Why are we concerned with their daughters? What's wrong with their daughters? Mishum dovo acher. And their daughters, we are concerned with idolatry itself. That's to say, the Gemara says in nice language, dovo acher, but really what they mean is idolatry. So the reason why we're concerned with their daughters is idolatry. Or everything boils down to their daughters, and their daughters boils down to idolatry. So if someone, God forbid, marries a non-Jew, it might happen that she'll tell him on Sunday, let's go to the church, and it would lead to it. Now, if she's not going to take him, she's going to take the kids, and that's the end of it.
Yep.
So the Gemara says, why is Dovo Acher? What is using this terminology, Dovo Acher? Something else. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak said that decreed on a Gentile child, shemetame beziva, that he causes contamination as if he were in a state of ziva, of someone that has an omission, irregular emission. So we don't want a Jewish child to be associated with him. A Jewish child should not associate with him. Mishkaf zochu, for God forbid, for the purpose of sodomy. So the rabbis feared that close association with them could lead to sodomy. If so, Rabbi Meir nami tishas Ravin. So according to Rabbi Meir, there are 19 enactments that Beit Shammai enacted on that very day. So the Gemara says, the cases of foods and beverages and vessels that were contracted tumah from liquids, he reckons as one, so it's really 18 enactments. Let's go to the Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses the permissibility of work begun before Shabbos that will continue unaided on the Shabbos. You're starting something before Shabbos, it will roll into Shabbos. You don't have to do anything, but the work continues. We may not soak ink, dyes, or vetch, unless there is a sufficient time for them to become completely soaked while it is yet day. This is reminding me like the cholent. We have to make sure that at least 50% or more is cooked before Shabbos. Can start right before Shabbos and allow it to cook throughout Shabbos. Ela Beisila said, permit in either event, it does not have to be soaked completely from during the day. A second area of dispute between Beit Shammai and Beisila. We may not place bundles of flax into the oven, unless there is sufficient time for them to become heated while it is yet day. And nor may we place a wool into a dyer's vat, unless there is sufficient time for it to absorb the color while it is still day. Beisil permit these things in either event. Second dispute between Beit Shammai and Beisil. A third area of dispute. One may not spread traps for beasts, birds, or fish, unless there is sufficient time for them to be trapped while it is yet day, Friday. Beisil permitted in either event. That you're allowed to place trap before Shabbos. Another fourth area of dispute. Beit Shammai says we're not allowed to sell nochri, a goy, a Gentile. On Friday we may not sell an article to a Gentile. We may not load his animal together with him. And we may not lift a load upon him. Unless there is sufficient time for him to reach a nearby place before the arrival of Shabbos. Because if you're putting something on his back on Friday afternoon, right before Shabbos, he'll be carrying what you placed on his back on Shabbos. Beisil permit these things in either event. Well, obviously the Gemara will discuss the reasoning behind it, but we're just learning now the different disputes, the general dispute between Beit Shammai and Beisila. The fifth dispute, Beit Shammai, we may not give hides to a gentle tanner, to a goy tanner. We may not give hides to a Gentile tanner, nor clothing to a Gentile launderer. This is actually very relevant to our time, unless there is sufficient time for them to be done while it is yet day. So, like giving your laundry to a dry cleaning to a dry cleaner is not a Jew. We're giving it to him right before Shabbos. And if he's doing it right there and then, it's a question. Unless there is a sufficient time for them to be done while it is yet day. But Beis in all these cases, Beis permit while the sun is still up. Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, Noagino Beisabo, 18a1. It was their precise. It was their practice in my father's household. This was the practice in my father's household. That they would give white cloth to a Gentile launderer, or clothes to a Gentile launderer 3 days before Shabbos. V'shovin elu v'elu, and both these and those, meaning Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, concur, they agree, shetoyanin koiras Beis Habad v'igul agas, that we may place the beams of the olive press on the crushed olives, and the circular planks of the wine press on the crushed grapes Friday afternoon, even though oil and juice will be pressed on the Shabbos itself. Shakach will continue, God willing, tomorrow. Bruchim to you.
So